Today we're going to look at completing the square, but before we look at completing the square, we should look at an idea that's called perfect squares. And all three of these things are perfect squares. We're going to factor them and see what we mean by perfect squares. So if you were to factor this one, you would say, okay, we're going to get x plus 2. Because I have to think of two numbers that multiply together to give me 4 and add together to give me 4, and x plus 2. Well, because they're exactly the same, I could write it as x plus 2 squared. Okay, let's see what would happen when we factor this one. So if we factored this one, we'd get x plus 4 and x plus 4. So we could write x plus 4 squared. If we look at this one, we think about what multiplies together to give us this and adds together to give us this. That'd be x plus 5 and x plus 5. And we could write that one as x plus 5 squared. Now the nice thing that you should be able to notice is in this is a couple patterns. Like, how does this number relate to this number? Every single time. So when I look at that, if this thing is a perfect square, we can see that the middle number and this number in there will always be half. So it's like half of that one. Every single time it's half. Well, let's do the same thing with the last number. So if you look at the last number and that number, it's like the square root to get from here to here every single time. So these perfect squares are really, really nice because if I get a problem, let's say I get a problem that looks like this, where I get x squared plus 18x plus 81, I would know that this is x plus 9 squared. Again, because like half of that number, and then if you square that number, it all works out. Okay, so this pattern can be really, really helpful. Now the idea in completing the square, when we get to completing the square, is they're going to give us two numbers. And we are going to want to be able to pick the third number. So I might have x squared plus 14x, and I might not know the last number. Well, I can pick what the last number is, because I know when this compresses down, it should be x plus 7 squared. And then when you think about what the last number should be, it should be 49. Because the square root of 49 is 7, or 7 times 7 is 49. Let's do one more of these. So again, I wanted to make this a perfect square. So we know that half of this would be in here. And then 15 times 15 would be 225. Whoops. So we just put that 225 in there. Okay? Now you may be thinking, what would happen if this was a negative number or a decimal? So let's see. So let's do the negative number first. So if you had x squared minus let's go with 20x plus blank. Well, then you would do the exact same thing. You would go, okay, now I have x minus 10 squared, because half of that is how I get to there. And this, I know will be a positive, because you can't take the square root of a negative number, and negative 10 times negative 10 would be positive 100. So this last number will always be positive. It's just now my inside part would become negative. Let's see what would happen if we got a decimal. So we might get x squared plus 5x, and then we have the blank there. Well, again, we would take half of that, which is 2.5, and then you just have to do 2.5 squared on your calculator, which is 6.25. So you can always find these perfect squares. Use this information to help you watch the completing square video and do the problems.